I won't sit here and say that I know the answer to that, because it's always until you are at a space where you have to think through, you you never really know. And I would not really know how I'll react. The thing is, I've already talked to him about it, and I've told him, first of all, I'm too pretty to be a grandmother at this age. I am too hot.
Welcome back to Now That I'm Older. My name is Murugi Ndwiga, and parenting seasons are different for everybody. Today I'm joined by a guest. Her name is Emily Manjeru, aka Nyinawa Ryan, whose journey into parenting started at 19 years. I'd want to hear more from her about that journey and what her season of motherhood has been like up until this point. Karibu sana, Emily.
Asante. I'm actually really proud of you for putting this show together. It's so nice.
Thank you.
And I'm proud of what we have achieved, knowing our history. Thank you for welcoming me.
Thank you so much. Karibu sana to this channel.
Asante.
We go way back, but I know your journey into motherhood started quite early. At 19, looking back, miaka zimeenda, looking back, what would you tell yourself? What would you tell the 19-year-old Emily who is clueless about motherhood? And I mean, how has it been? How would you calm that 19-year-old girl?
The 19-year-old girl was curious. She was loving, but she loved in all the wrong places. And one of the things that she looked for mostly is a sort of a relief, or a sort of an anchor, because a few years before she had lost her dad. And when she discovered that she was pregnant, she was like, oh my God, how am I pregnant at second year in campus? And being in campus, especially being an environment where everyone is discovering themselves and everyone is so curious, there were a lot of things that she could have done better then. For example, better company, better choices, possibly even more confidence than she portrayed back then. There was a lot of naivety that she could have probably moved away from, that she didn't. And so when she got knocked up at 19, she was actually a character in a play in which there was a group of white people who had come and impregnated the natives. So I was a real character, a real pregnant one. And everyone next to her was dressed in costumes. So when someone mentioned that, isn't she like pregnant for real? That...
So you took up the role?
Yeah, I took up the role. Easy, because, well, they were looking for pregnant people. But the thing about that 19-year-old is that she was so alone. Even in the midst of company, even in the midst of everyone around her, she was very lost as to who to reach out to when it came to things about her sex life, her personal struggles, and the grief that she had carried on for so many years. So discovering that she was pregnant, she was like, God, please give me a boy. And she was so in love, by the way. Eh? So we go way back. I was in love with this gentleman for a very long time. You know those puppy loves? The ones that you hold on to.
Love.
My first love. And I had this whole castle in the air dream. I'm going to get married to this guy. We're going to have babies.
You're going to get married at what, 19?
21. That's when I knew I was going to be married with 3 children and a house on the hill with picket fences. And
what did you
she
know
believed
about love and
exactly.
marriage?
What does she know?
19?
I don't know what she knew. She just believed in the dream. And
He was that good?
well, I don't
to
know.
be seen to be a husband.
He said all the right things.
And you believed it?
And I believed every single one of those words, because I didn't quite have someone to tell me all those words. So the affirmations were legit for
What
that
was your
19-year-old.
mom telling you at that point about it? About love, about marriage, about boyfriends, what conversations are you having with her?
Don't have a boyfriend. Who's this? Kike, ukiongea na mwanaume. So those are the things that we're being told. You should not hang around men, you know, you should be more proper. I was raised by a very strict mom, and I celebrate her. Now looking back at that, I celebrate her for really being strict with us, because had she not been, maybe some things would have gone sideways. So fast forward, 19 years old, she's knocked up, and coincidentally, her best friend is also knocked up a few months before. Please don't ask. This is where peer pressure is so bad. But when I saw my best friend, I was also like, you know what? It doesn't hurt. I mean, and so am I. We're going to be together. We'll fight this. I was terrified. When you have a best friend and you think that you can be there for each other, then it becomes your fight when you have to be the one to sit with your mom and tell her, Mom, I'm pregnant. And I remember the stage was set. It was some hour of the night. And I remember that day I had discovered, and I was like, ooh, I have to tell her. But I'm keeping this one. I was about 3 months pregnant. I remember I was about 3 months pregnant, and I told her. We were seated at a dinner table, and it was quiet, and I was like, Mom, I have something to tell you. I'm pregnant. And there was no dead silence. You know, the silence of, let me absorb the information. She was like, I know. So now who's the father? Are we keeping it? I was like, I'm keeping it, but I'm not telling you who the father is. Sometimes I even wonder why.
Were you still together at the time of discovering that you were pregnant?
Yeah, I hadn't told him yet. I wanted to first deal with the bigger mountain. First of all, you deal with the family first, and then you go to the other one. It was very turbulent, I can say, about that whole process of discovering that you're expecting and hoping that the person who got you to this point can show up and say, you know what, I love this woman, I'm going to take care of her. And that was the whole castle in the air that I was still building. Remember, I had a dream. When I finally realized that this is me against the world, because with all the love I have, my mom and I now parted ways mentally. Like, we couldn't speak to one another properly. And it was very, very difficult, because the questions she would have is, how are we taking care of this child? How are we going to sort all those things out, you know, and how are you going to go back to school? But being that she raised us very well to be strong, to be independent, I figured that I'm going to figure this out. So that 19-year-old is alone a lot. She's trying to find solace a lot. She's trying to get with everyone who has now disappeared from her life, and trying to form alliances with people who would honestly feel her, who would honestly listen to her, because it was one of the loneliest moments of my life. It was tough because I still wanted to finish school. And thankfully, one of the teachers that I was working for, because I was on a work study program, was very understanding. He's elder. He was like in his late 50s. Now he's in his late 60s, 60s, 70s. He was very understanding. And he would just check up on me and ask me, are you okay today? Once you finish, just go home. And I took about 6 months of school. The first 3 months, of course, to take care of my baby. Then the next 3 to properly hustle. Yeah.
Now you've given birth. How good, how bad is it? What's the situation like now? How much had you managed to save? What's the situation like back at home?
Let's just say I had 0 when my baby was born. I didn't expect him to come in the driest month of the year, which is January. So everyone is going through in January, and the baby decides to come. I assumed my EDD was going to be sometime in Feb, where I would have at least some money, or people would have money enough to lend me some.
How much had you saved now that you're saving?
I think I had only saved like 2K.
How did you manage the costs?
Shillings. Thankfully, even with all the pain that she was going through and the shame, because she really struggled, my mom. She really struggled with the shame that people would, castigate against her. She felt the pain of her fellow women looking at this beautiful girl. Now she's pregnant and she's tiny and she's looking like so confused and lost. And her friends, some of them would really berate me because they were like, are you pregnant? You should be in school, and all those things that they would say. You know, you were brought up well, you know, you should know better, among other things. You were educated well. So there was a lot of that. And I gave birth. My uncle was there, my mother's brother. My mom was there, very supportive.
So the
through
one
the
who
entire.
put the bills.
So the thing about family, whether you mess up or whether you are doing the right thing, they will always be there. And that's one of the strongest foundations I have about family, that while you may feel alone, you may feel like you're walking this journey alone. In truth, they are walking that journey with you. They're feeling your pain with you. It's just that maybe they're not expressing it in the same way that you would expect, you know. So my uncle came through, thank God. My mom also supported with the bill. I gave birth at a modest hospital because I could only afford that hospital. So we are back home and the proper parenting journey begins. The sleepless nights, the baby screaming and crying, and the late nights of a child having to take a child to hospital.
Are your siblings, is your mom helping you at this point? It's on you.
It's on me. So my mom told me very clearly, since you've decided you're going to be a mom, then you're going to take care of this child. But of course she was there, at least helping me in the first few months. She was taking good care of us. Even though we had silent treatment in the house, but at least there was always food, and there was always something to eat. And I think that's where I gained a lot more strength to want to become a better parent, to want to take care of my child, because I felt responsible. No, after now my first 3 months of sleepless nights and the craziness of raising an infant in that stage, I went out and hustled. I was selling airtime. I was selling credit. I worked with it was a branding agency at the time.
So that's when you officially started working.
That was my very first job. Yes, that was my very first job. And when I started working, I was ready for anything. In fact, when I was very surprised when my first check of 7Gs came, I was over the moon. Hey,
A lot of money.
hey, it was enough to at least get proper clothes, to get decent food, like enough to take care of my child, so that I can demonstrate I'm responsible. Part of what I also learned in that season is that in as much as, like I said, in as much as there was silence in the house, I had a support system with my mom. My brother, my sister are in high school, so they
So
are
is
not
this your
with us.
mom,
It's just my mom and
you
I.
and the baby?
Yes, and the house help.
Who's paying the house help?
Woo! Who else? So we're splitting costs between myself and my mom. But then the food, the little we could get together, we just pump it into taking care of young Ryan. It was difficult, I must admit. So we have moved fast forward now.
And fast forward now, knowing what you know now, how old is your son right now?
Don't age me, but he's 16. 16 years later.
16 years later, what would you, knowing what you know now, what would you tell her, the 19-year-old self?
I'd tell her to not be afraid to grieve. Because a lot of the things that happened in that season were so many overwhelming things about feeling a void. It was hard.
You're trying to fill your dad's void.
I was feeling my father's void. And so I found absolute joy when my son came. Like I felt complete, whether I was complete or not. But that's what I felt at the time. And knowing what I know now, it's maybe inviting parents who go through turbulence to speak to their children, to just reassure them, I know the journey is hard for them, but then having and carrying your child along, carrying your children along helps so much, because then the burden is shared. It doesn't mean that you're going to burden your children with your pain. It just means that they are more aware So they will possibly make whatever decisions they make, good or bad, at least they're aware. And it would have possibly helped me a lot more. I would have felt more confident. Maybe I would have said a lot more no's than I said yeses. I would have possibly known when to, pause on whatever it was that I was going through. Because the space needed to have been created for me to do so. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying that there's spaces where, as a young teenager, now that I'm raising one, there is space for the parent to be honest with conversations and be very blunt when the moment calls for it. But then it's also important to create a space where you and your child have an open communication where they can come and tell you, Mom, I have a girlfriend. Because that's the kind of conversations we have now. I have learned so much about him. I thought I knew until I don't. And there's tons more that I'm sure I don't know. But the fact that I am creating a space where he's also able to be vulnerable with me, because there are things that he tells me, Mom, please don't tell Shusho. Don't tell Auntie, but I need to talk to you. That gives me confidence that I'm possibly doing something right. That in the space where he may possibly be taking advantage of the fact that we can be having those kinds of conversations, but the beauty is that he's talking to me. At least I'm aware. Yeah.
And when did you start getting intentional about this part of your relationship with your son?
We possibly started when he was younger, way younger, maybe around 7, 8. But then I would carry him everywhere. I would carry him to work. When we were working and I'm on leave, I'd possibly carry him when I'm doing transfer forms and things like that. I'd carry him to school. So everyone would see, even to school. Like I would go with him to school. I'd go with him to my friends. Anywhere and everywhere, he was always with me. And there are times when I would sit and I would ask him questions, when he's with every stage. So he would be honest about those feelings. And I told him, I need you to talk to me if you have a problem.
Can I put you on the spot?
You've already put me on the spot in this one.
If your son right now, he's 16, comes to you and tells you, Mom, I have a girlfriend who's pregnant. Knowing what you know now, given the experience back then and what your mom did, how would you handle that?
I think we've already
differently?
I honestly don't know. I won't sit here and say that I know the answer to that, because it's always until you are at a space where you have to think through, you never really know. And I would not really know how I'll react. The thing is, I've already talked to him about it, and I've told him, first of all, I'm too pretty to be a grandmother at this age. I am too hot, so please, and I'm too busy right now taking care of us. Please don't bring me a girlfriend who's pregnant. But also because the people that I surrounded him with, I told them to be intentional about values of respecting women, about values of appreciating women and taking every girl that's that age until he is properly an adult with his own place, he's able to take care of a girl. So it's always a wish of a parent that whatever you tell your children at some point will come to materialize. It's always my prayer that all the conversations that we have about sex, about girlfriends, that he understands that he becomes responsible, especially as a guy, that there's a lot of responsibility that he has to prepare himself for. It's not about shielding him from the truth that is life, because the reality is there are teenagers who are getting pregnant at this age. I mean, I was one of them. But then the important thing is knowing that if you're carrying life, it's a God-given responsibility. That if you're going to bring life into this world, you have to carry that to the moment where they have gone home, or rather they've created a life of their own. And that's what I really appreciate about what my mom taught us, that she made sure that we have all three of us have grown into independent, strong, hardworking people who value hard work, who value the sense of family, who value the importance of responsibility. That is the much I appreciate about her, that I'm now transcending to my son. So when he comes to me and tells me that I have a pregnant girlfriend, he better be 20 plus something, because I'll ask him, I told you. I would honestly go with the I told yous, and I'd possibly
Weren't you
flip.
told?
I
What
wasn't
were you told? What
Didn't
were you
I
told
tell
by
you?
your mom? What were you told by your mom? What conversation? Hata kama ni kitu moja, what conversation did you have with your mom back then before you got pregnant?
They were all abstinence conversations. We never really sat to talk about sex and boys. It was never really a talk. It was you should stay away. And I was curious. I have always been the curious child. So I wanted to find out, what is this I'm being told no for? Why am I being told no? So that was possibly one of the things that, it was not the intended lesson, if I could say that.
And I'm curious, at what point were you very deliberate, and did you figure out, I need to do 1, 2, 3 things to set the path straight for my son, for your son?
Ever since he was born, I think.
And what were those things that you, these ones were no-brainers? I have to do ABCD for my son, and he has to come out in such a way.
Ever since he was young, I think I can't quite put a finger on exactly when, because we've always been there to say, it's important to pray, it's important to work hard and celebrate and reward the successes. So I can't quite put a finger on when that started. All I know is I wish I could have done more, though. I wish more present, or sometimes you have to make some really tough sacrifices. But at the very least, or at the very most, being there for his significant events.
What have been the sacrifices that you've had to make over the years? Being a single parent.
When you're a mom and dad, there are times when your masculine energy is switched on, especially as a woman, and you have to start now fending. You have to start being the breadwinner. And there are moments where you would emotionally detach to financially provide. So in the quest to continuously provide for my child, there are moments where I remember he would be very upset with me because he would hardly see me. He would say, "Mom, you're traveling a lot. I would like for us to hang out." And those things would sting when he would come to me and say that, and I would wonder.
And at this point, when you're traveling, who are you leaving him with?
My sister, sometimes my mom, sometimes my cousin, but mostly my sister. My family, like I said, my family is everything. If you see my son, he's a product of everyone in that circle. So it would be especially my sis and my mom. They would be the ones to hold on to him when I'm away. So those sacrifices were hard. And you're trying to see the bigger picture, because as best as you can, you're doing everything in your power to maintain some form of provision. Because this for me this is my responsibility. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that all the shame that people called it, all the stigma that they put on our family is going to be turned around somehow. And I'm going to be that shining light that I had always been. So I don't know whether it's some form of retribution or it's revenge or whatever you may call it. I don't know. But what I know is I needed to make sure that at the very least my son has good education, he has good values, he has people who care about him. And those do come at a cost. They come at a cost of time, intimate time with your child. They come at a cost of missing some pickups and drop-offs because you're focusing on the provision side, especially as a single parent. So there are those moments. The confidence that I had when I was younger, I felt like that period when I was expecting was a pause period. That I was in a difficult season. But then the seasons of difficulty also continue to come. But the things that I used to pick myself up were remembering that I was always a bright chick, a bright girl, a confident one. At some point, I was top of class. So I believed in that young girl. And I carried her with me after college. When I decided I'm going to complete college, I was so happy when I got my degree. And thankfully, because I always sought out spaces to show my talent.
Speaking of failures, what's that one failure? And we cannot say that getting pregnant really was a failure. But in this journey, that you failed and, man, it really put you down. And how did you get yourself out of that?
Let me think about that one.
Anytime today.
Oh, anytime today. Right. Yes, in the interest of time. I think the biggest failure was not being intentional about the choice of person that I'm going to raise my child with. That I think was a failure, because I should have made a better decision.
But did you know better at
I did know
19?
better. I did know better. I could have possibly done better there, but that is possibly one of the many failures, because there are plenty that we do not have time for right now. Yeah.
But if you say that is the failure, has it set your life on a different path, different trajectory? As in, how has your life panned out now that you look at it?
That's I don't know. I don't know how it would have been.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You wouldn't know.
You never really know, because that's a tough one. I wouldn't know if he said, yeah, it's fine, I will take her, and then maybe I would have been a married woman somewhere in my early 20s, and maybe I would have really struggled through marriage, perhaps. I don't know.
You never know.
That's a
You always connect the
Yeah.
dots backwards. So you, yeah.
Maybe I would have been miserable. I don't know.
What has
I
been,
don't know.
and in this 16-year journey, what's been the most challenging? Ile yenye unajua tu, hey,
Dating.
this one.
Hey, let me even say it, dating has been hard. Because, the first thing, I am very proud of my child. And I am still very young and very beautiful, right? So I think...
Yes, you have to keep telling yourself that.
Yes,
Otherwise, nobody else is
those
going to.
affirmations help.
Yes.
And keeping yourself as well in a space where you are worthy. Carry yourself in a space where you definitely walk into a room and you silence the negativity has been one of my mantras. So dating has been very difficult, because there are things that you look out for. And the older the child grows, the more difficult it becomes, because then there's a whole human being whose values are pegged on someone else. And then there's always the mental block of, can I trust this person with my child? Like the way I trust my son with my family, am I okay enough to let someone's son come into our lives and be in charge? First of all, let's begin with the fact that I've already gotten so used to being in charge and not being, like, really just making sure that whatever I have taught my son continues, and that he knows that he's in a space where he's okay to be, he's going to be okay. So that has been very hard, I must admit. I don't know how to date. So now I'm starting or learning or unlearning or relearning about dating.
And in the past, the people you've dated, do you introduce them to your son?
Not all of them. No, not all of them. It takes a lot before I can say I'm introducing so and so. There are hits and misses. There are those that you honestly feel, this one,
This one.
till death does us part. And then things happen and you part ways. Both sides to blame, one side to blame, probably me to blame. But the the toughest ones are, can I trust this person with my child? That's always the toughest question. And I take so much time. So it makes, especially people nowadays are so impatient. And maybe I am also just as impatient. I am very cautious, extremely cautious, and probably overly cautious about that part, yeah.
And talking about this 2 years to 18, what are you really putting effort into? Nini unaona? This one he hasn't quite grasped, but this part you're confident about. What are you working on right now?
Vijana. Yeah. You know, teenage, I don't know whether do you remember your teenage years and how...
Hardly.
You don't remember your teenage years?
There are some aspects, of course, I do, but there
Yeah.
are aspects, of course, I do not. Because
the self-discovery, the mistakes that you make in adolescence, the curiosity, the especially when it comes to drugs, substance abuse, you know, all the villainous things, all the negative social behavior. And now it's harder because of the internet. And being unable to entirely protect your child from all of that is very hard. So there are things that he will absorb. And teenagers being who they are, they absorb everything from their peers before they listen to you. So with just like every other parent, I struggle to connect with my son at this stage because he's going through a whole season of, I am now a teenager, I don't need to listen to my mom doesn't know any better, she's older. There's a sense of you have to be present. I think at the very least, being physically present, talking to him when you can, is now the things that I'm doing my best to be intentional about. Visiting with him in school, talking to the teachers and asking him about his academic performance so that he doesn't feel like school is a burden. What makes it even harder to convince these children about education is how in the interwebs or on the news we're seeing graduates struggling through life, and all the people who do not seem to be doing well somehow are glorified and they're appreciated. And so it becomes a whole can of worms that you're bringing your child into a world where hard work is looked down upon, and when you are lazy and you're doing shallow content, that is being appreciated. So you can only do so much as a parent. You can tell your child there is consequences to taking drugs at this stage. There's consequences to being pregnant. There's consequences to getting irresponsible with your sexual life. But when you're doing that in the space where everyone else around them seems to be doing so well, and they're doing all the things that you have told them no, is a prayer that you will consistently have as a parent. That everyone who has told him that this is actually wrong, that they take it that it is wrong. That they do see that they're not going to be young forever. That in 2 years' time he's going to grow up and he's going to be out. Now this is second term or Form 2. Form 3 will come and it will become harder, and they'll keep saying, Mom, school is hard. And I'm thinking, I know, I went through the same system. And we're surviving and we did it, and helping them see the significance of education, of hard work, of proper values, is paying it forward to the future self, is where the burden of parenting is right now.
Have you dealt with any of those issues of maybe drugs or substance abuse?
At this stage, I might be exposing, but you will never miss one or two of those, whether it's in passing or whether he's involved in them. If any teenager hasn't gone through any one of those things, they're a saint or they're lying about something. Yeah. If you're this is teenage. A friend of mine told me that if a teenager comes to you and tells you their version of the truth, don't believe them. There's always another version. Truth. Yes. And so now, being the human being that you are, you take everything that they say with a pinch of salt, because you are not entirely meant to believe in your child. To believe your child, but you believe in them. But you have to remember that you're the parent, and you have to be firm. and you have to have values that there's absolute non-negotiables. And when you dictate the non-negotiables, you make it clear to everyone around that these are my non-negotiables. So whenever he's coming to you and thinking that you're a loophole, seal it by saying mom said or dad said, whichever side it may be. So it's a continuous journey. Hits and misses, woo,
Yeah,
they're
man.
many.
And knowing what you know now, what would you say? Because we are parenting in a different generation, and things have really changed. What are some of the things that we are dealing with?
Yeah.
If a parent, if a kid right now were to go to their parent and tell them, I'm pregnant, or they're dealing with drugs, parents' reaction, that the current parent right now who's at our age and knows more, how would you advise them to handle that situation?
Knowing what I know now.
Yeah, knowing what you know now.
Be
And
a
to
parent.
that teenager who's going through this, a 19-year-old who's pregnant.
Don't speak when you're angry. Because the first reaction will be anger. That's for sure. I have to laugh through that one because I have found myself flying off the handle quite a number of times. And it's a human reaction. But then I think the good book says there's things that you say with your tongue that have power. So if your child comes to you and tells you that they're pregnant, I think I would react in the same way that my mother did. I'd possibly ask you, so now, because at this stage it's a choice. At the stage where...
Especially having spoken to them.
It was an intentional choice.
Yeah.
So it's to remind them that your choices have consequences and you have to be responsible for them. But I'm not carrying the burden for you. Because if you're a teenager, and that's where I think we lose it at this season, where we have become lenient and we've become more conversational, but we have forgotten to really really be firm. That's a lesson that I have had to learn the hard way.
Being firm.
Being very firm. Because your teenager is someone who has already PMA'd you. And they know that you'll possibly be okay with their decision. But if you want to take care of a 25, 26-year-old who's jobless because they chose to be lazy, then it started possibly when you didn't connect with your child at a parent-to-child stage. But for the parent who has a child who's pregnant, let them carry that burden. It will strengthen them. It will be hard for you to watch, but it will strengthen them. If I am a testimony of it, if my mom didn't hold me to account for the mistakes or the consequences that I had to carry, I don't think I would have been as good a parent as I am. But I'm not a good parent alone. I'm a parent with a whole community around me. And I would say the exact same thing. Let them carry the consequences of their mistakes. Let them own up. Don't shield them from the reality of their mistakes. Because if they don't see the reality of what they have done, they will always be gleaning to you as a fallback, as a fail-safe, and you'll find yourself carrying their burden. Yeah, it sounds like a very harsh thing to say, but it's the truth of what can really help.
It's a tough love situation.
Tough love.
19-year-old Emily, what does she want to become, and does she become that?
19-year-old Emily.
Bado uko safarini.
I think 19-year-old Emily wanted, like she said, a whole family, big five, 6 children, but that's from the family side, right? Career-wise, she wanted to be at the helm of whatever she was going out for. I'd always wanted to be in film. by the way, not even in public relations. I'd always wanted to be in film, but behind the scenes, you know, carrying cameras
But
and
you were at
moving.
19. You
Cindy,
kind of
oh,
understood.
yes. In fact, at 19 in college, I was so passionate about my career in journalism. I wanted to do film because for some reason I was always fascinated by that part. But then when I got my second internship somehow, I found myself doing PR and the rest is history. Career-wise, she's grateful for everyone who believed in her. She's grateful for the small spaces to be able to show her talent where it was necessary, because the Emily of now is a very, very proud, very happy, very grateful, very humble, even though it doesn't look that way, but very humble person because of all of the people who believed in her.
And ironically, now you're working with a lot of babies.
Yes.
That's a good place to stop.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. It's a good place to end, because now the kind of stigma that we're dealing with is with clefts or congenital birth defects. And mothers will always bear the brunt of societal stigma, whether they give birth to a good baby, whether they give birth to a child with a congenital deformity. The society will always judge them harshly. So thankfully, the organization I work for is called Smile Train, and we do cleft lip, which is a gap in the roof of the mouth, which can go into, the roof of the mouth, which is the palate. There's physiological challenges to that beyond the cosmetic side of things. There's the difficulty in eating, in breathing, in speaking, and the societal stigma of being bullied and being called names. Then in contrast, there's you yourself believing that you have not done anything wrong, or maybe it was passed through your family, and you're still trying to figure out, how do I get through this? So thankfully with Smile Train, what we do is we partner with hospitals so that the parents, both parents, mom and dad, know that there's somewhere they can get help, that it's the nearest partner hospital, and that the child will grow up into a beautiful child. So those have become my other children. And
Your
being
other
now
5, 6 for
is,
now.
exactly. So being able to create the awareness that cleft is not a curse has become my second calling, first being me being a mom. So now helping fellow mothers through the stigma that they may experience through storytelling is my second calling at work. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for sharing your story.
It wasn't the easiest. Hey.
You looked
Thank you
easy and okay and comfortable and vulnerable to your stories. I hope that one or two people pick a lesson from it. I mean, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, choices have consequences. So you take what is in your hands and run with it, whether good or bad. But at the end of the day, you just make the best out of it. And you've made the best out of your situation. You did make the best out of your situation.
Might as well. What else is there to do?
Yeah.
Thank you for hosting me.
Karibu sana. Guys, I hope you've picked one or two lessons. And it's just not for parents. It's also for teenagers who are going through, you've gotten pregnant, you're dealing with drug substance abuse. I mean, at the end of the day, choices have consequences. Bear them. I mean, it's yours to deal with. So I hope we've learned one or two things. Until next time, please like, share, comment in the section below what you've picked from today's session. Until next time, have a good one.